Tabspace. So, today I have got another article, and basically, I asked my Instagram, would you rather find out that you have a mental illness as an adult or as a child? Which one do you think would be more difficult? To me, I think that it's probably harder on the trauma standpoint as a kid to deal with a mental illness because you can handle more as an adult than you can handle as a kid. But genuinely, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like if you have to deal with a mental illness at any point in your life, it's going to be very difficult. But for me, I think that it was easier for me to be diagnosed with bipolar as a child than I believe it would be for me to try to figure it out now that I'm an adult. But I can only go off of my perspective. I don't know too many people that were diagnosed as adults with mental illness. So beyond that, I think that a diagnosis takes a minute to set in for a person. So the faster you learn that you have something going on, the quicker you can start to fix it. So if you don't find out until you're in your late, 20s or whatever the case may be, you might regret all those years that you couldn't have known what you now know. And now you can fix it, but now you kind of feel regret for not fixing it sooner. But yeah, I was diagnosed with bipolar at 16. I didn't really understand what it meant to be bipolar until I was about 20. And I still learn every day what it means to be bipolar. Because as I grow and as I change with it, it keeps growing along with me. And when I was a kid, the things that I did didn't matter nearly as much as they do now. You know what I mean? If I didn't go to school for a month or however long I needed for my mental health, if I had to go to homeschool, if I had to do something else, that was an option. You know what I mean? You don't really have that with work. Like if you go on a medical leave, you could do that, but if you don't have PTO or anything like that, you're not making any money. So if you don't have any other financial support, you're now in a position where you might have to make some major life adjustments along with trying to figure out your diagnosis. And then you got to think about how much time you use throughout the day as an adult. I mean, 8 hours a day is spent at work for most of us. I don't know a ridiculous amount of people that run their own business. I know a few. And those of you that have that ability, I commend you for that. But most of us have to, we don't have a choice but to be somewhere for at least 8 hours a day, sometimes 10, depending on the job. Depending on the job, a certain amount of energy is being used as well. So if you work a physically demanding job, not only are you gone for 8 hours where you can't do anything, to help your mental, you are physically exerting yourself. So you may be exhausting yourself, and when you're mentally ill, it starts to physically show. So if you're really going through it, you could start to feel weak. It could start to be difficult to go to work and do what you need to do on a day to day. So, if you are being, diagnosed as an adult with something, I commend you because you're fighting a very hard fight that a lot of people would rather not. They'd rather deal with it and not know what it is and not like call it out or put a name or a label on it so that way they don't have to like deal with that. But that doesn't stop you from experiencing the symptoms that come along with it. So I commend you for taking the time to figure out what you got going on and trying to fix it. And I mean, like, it depends on the support system that you built when you were a kid. That's gonna be a major factor in any treatment plan, is having a good support system. So, you know, when you're a kid, you got your teachers, your principals, you got all these people, these adults around you that, you know, whether they like it or not, they gotta protect you and make sure you're good. So, when you're an adult, you don't have that same level of support. You might have your boss, you might have coworkers, you might have, you know what I mean? But like, do those people genuinely care about your well-being, and do they have to? No. You know what I mean? They don't have to if they don't want to. So if you don't have a good rapport with those people, you're protected from the consequences of your actions as well, along with having adults. You know, you can get away with a certain amount of stuff as a kid that can easily be like wiped off of like a clean slate, whereas an adult, you got one time to mess up real big and you going to go to jail. Like, and it's going to stay on your record. You might be able to expunge it or do work to like get to that point, but that's going to take a lot of work. Like, and it's going to take a lot of money as well. So yeah, basically you get a certain benefit of the doubt when you're a kid, and when you're an adult that benefit of the doubt completely diminishes. We don't Once you hit 18, you start to hear you should know better. And there are certain things where you should know better. But there are also certain things where if a person doesn't know better, there's a reason behind why they don't. And we, as adults, tend to look past that and not really care because we just care about you should know better. But you gotta dive a little bit deeper to figure out why a person doesn't know better. And some of it might have to do with whatever they got going on mentally. I mean, if you know what a manic episode is, imagine dealing with a manic episode as an adult. I'm gonna use Kanye as my example because I always use him as an example. When Kanye gets to like saying crazy stuff, and everyone just be like, "Oh, cancel him, everything, da 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 da." Agreed, the things that he's saying are not right, but we all do know that that man has bipolar disorder, and a lot of the things that that man says can be very delusional from time to time. So when you're dealing with a mental health issue, people don't know what you're going through, so they just write you off as being crazy or being wrong, and they focus more on that than why you're acting that way, to where you don't get help. That's why it's very important that you have to advocate for your mental health, because nobody else is going to do it for you. So, I'm going to tell y'all a little story about me. Since I told y'all, I was diagnosed at 16. And whenever I read about something, or, I'm in any situation where I'm thinking about mental health, I try to put myself as close to understanding where a person is coming from as possible. So, I was 16 when I got diagnosed. That gave me a 2-year age gap where I didn't have to deal with the repercussions of being an adult. So, when I was a kid and I was hospitalized, I was taken very seriously. I was able to figure out what was going on with me. And not me, but my, psychiatrist was able to do that. And they take very good care of you in these hospital situations because it's vital that you get out of that alive for everybody involved. So they care and they're going to evaluate you. And at a mental health facility, they should care. They should evaluate you and they should make sure that you get better. Unfortunately, when you're an adult, they don't care that much about your well-being. This is about making money to a lot of these people. A lot of these people don't have a passion for it. And if you go to the wrong type of facility for what you got going on, your mental health will not be prioritized. So, when I was 18, when I was 16, I had my first manic episode. At 18, I had the worst one I've ever had because as they progress, the more times that you have a full-on manic episode, the more severe the episode is. So at this time, I had missed medication and my episode was bad. And it lasted a very long time. And I got to a point where my behavior was so much that I couldn't take it and my father couldn't take it, and it was time for me to go get help. So I went to the hospital, and while I was there, what you have to understand about somebody that's manic is that they have what is called delusions of grandeur, which means that they feel very entitled in a moment. So in that time, I felt very entitled, and I was also going through it. I was angry. I didn't want to be in that situation. I was in fight or flight mode. I was scared, mad. I was a whole lot of things. And I was manic. So when you're manic, you don't act as you should. You don't act as you should. So that said, people don't know how to take that. And if you're rude to them, that's all they're going to go off of. So in that time, I was rude to the people that I was around, especially because I felt dehumanized. When you're put on a 72-hour hold, which is basically where a doctor, a psychiatrist says this person needs to be under medical supervision for 72 hours and evaluated mentally. I was at that point. And the doctors that were at the hospital, they were not liking too much what I was doing. So it was a kind of an urgency of like, get her out of here, she's aggravating me, and also get her out of here, she needs help. And that urgency pushed me to go to a behavioral hospital rather than a mental health hospital. Because they just wanted to get me into a bed. It wasn't about getting me better. It was about getting me into a bed and getting me off of their plate. So in handcuffs, because they couldn't even wait for me to get an ambulance. No, I had to go in handcuffs, in a police cruiser, all the fun stuff. Basically like I'm going to jail, but I'm mentally ill in this moment. So that's terrifying too. And, I get there, and I'm going to tell you, the whole time I was there, I was with criminals every single day. People that were stabbing people that were doing hard drugs, people that just behaviorally, you know what I mean? So I say all that to say, when you're an adult, you might get sent to the wrong place because of how you're acting and the fact that you should know better. And you could go somewhere that does nothing but makes you worse. Because it didn't help. They didn't care that I got my medication. They didn't care that I got enough of it. I think it was one night I only took like a portion of it. Just cause they didn't care. They weren't going to ensure that I got the right amount. That wasn't what they were there to do. They were there to be glorified babysitters. Like, That was it. That was it. That was all. So, that said, me being in there, it was, eh. You know what I mean? It could have been worse. It could have been better. But that said, the point is, I didn't get the help that I needed. And when you're an adult, you might not get the help that you need. As a kid, I think there's a little bit more of a push because people understand just how vital it is that you make it out of there. And frankly, I need the medical profession as a whole to think the same way about adults as they do as children. Everybody is just as important as the last. And there are doctors that care, but you also have to care enough to get the help and to go through the uncomfortable parts of it. So, that was my little backstory on, dealing with my illness as an adult and kind of it took me about a year to come out of that manic state. And it took me years after to gain my like normal cognitive functioning back. Cuz after something like that, your brain is like kind of mush. Like you lose some developmental time there while you're in that state. You're not growing. You're not learning anything. You're just kind of going and going like the Energizer Bunny. Just keep going, just keep going. It's like that. So, coming out of that, it took years, but I was able to do it. And I was blessed to be around a good support system, but not everybody's so fortunate. And that's why being diagnosed as an adult sounds very trying to me. But I don't at all believe that it's not a fight worth fighting or something worth exploring. Because I'll be honest, a diagnosis, it's going to be scary at first. It might make you feel some type of way. But eventually, as it starts to make sense, as you get better, it's going to mean the world to you that somebody took the time to figure out that that's what you had going on with yourself. It might be something that you're seeking right now. And if that's the case, don't give up. Um, but yeah, as you might gather, being diagnosed as an adolescent does have certain benefits to it, and being diagnosed as an adult probably has benefits to it as well. Um, so let's get into this article that kind of like prompted me to even talk about this in the first place. So it's in Psychology Today. Um, So the beginning of the article, it gets into a story about a woman named Kiki. And she says for about 20 years, Kiki Brogowski tried to unearth the root cause of her panic attacks, disorganization, and analysis paralysis, which stopped her from finishing school and made her life feel increasingly difficult. Originally diagnosed with anxiety and PTSD, ADHD only came onto her radar in her 40s in part because the Instagram algorithm clocked her interest in ADHD related memes. I started to feel like, wow, these posts are posting at me. And she broached the possibility in therapy that was eventually diagnosed with ADHD and dyscalculia, a math related learning disability. So, emboldened by her diagnosis and one that fit, Rogowski went back to school at age 44. And at the beginning of the semester, she was sitting in her math class crying, but by the end, she scored a 95 on her final and got an overall A minus. So she thought that her life was ruined, but now she has a 3.9 GPA, 3.94 GPA. Don't miss that 4. Don't discount her. No, for real though. See, when I got my grades, the first person I called was my therapist. I cried and said, "Thank you so much." So, yeah, that diagnosis will really clear up a lot of things for you. It'll like, oh, that's why I did that. That's why I act like that sometimes. That's why. Now, I wouldn't suggest using it as an excuse, but I would suggest understanding the connections that you can make in your life to your diagnosis if, you know, you get to that point. Diagnosis can bring confusion at first, but ultimately it'll lead to clarity moving forward, and you can start to see why you did certain things in the past and learn to do better moving forward. So the article continues and it discusses the story of a woman named Erin Bullis, I think. It says a girl growing up in Adelaide, Australia, Erin Bullis spent a lot of time in front of the mirror. Driven neither by vanity nor a dislike of her appearance, she instead sought to replicate and master the facial expressions and social niceties that her peers all seemed to decode and deploy with ease. If she heard a laugh she liked, she practiced that too. Her mimicry rarely amounted to much. She says, I got so much wrong socially, though exactly what she couldn't always say. Sometimes she knew an interaction would turn sour when she was later uninvited from a birthday party. It felt like everyone else knew something I didn't, like no one had given me the memo. She retreated into herself, speaking to a few people, and often only in a whisper when she said, or when she did speak to people, she would whisper. Um, it wasn't until her 30s that Bullis's lifelong social challenges, along with her symptoms like intense interest in repetitive behaviors, were recognized by a doctor as autism spectrum disorder. Receiving the diagnosis felt like a celebration, an affirmation that she wasn't just difficult, boring, or awkward. But months later, grief set in. She realized, oh, some things are always going to be hard. Dealing with the sensory overload at a grocery store, expressing her emotions to non autistic loved ones, the way the world is set up, the way my brain functions, there's just a mismatch. I will say I agree that once you find out you have something, not only will it be like, yes, I can finally fix this, I know what I've been doing, there's a guilt that is associated because you're like, bruh, like, for real, like, I have to deal with this for the rest of my life and nobody else around me has to deal with this. Like, this sucks. But it's like, you have to find the good in it and understand where it becomes your superpower. Because mental health or mental illnesses are a superpower. They're something that other people cannot understand. Like, yeah, there's a small percentage of the population that will be on the same page with you and understand where you're coming from and all that, which is a whole different thing because, like, now you can communicate with a whole different subset and a whole different group of people and have a different association. But there's a large percentage of people that will never understand where you're coming from or what you mean or why you act the way you do sometimes and do the things that you do. And only you and those other people that deal with it will get it. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not a bad thing. So, as you can gather from this account, Erin experienced some difficulties from her mental health affliction, but not until she was diagnosed was she able to experience a mixture of accomplishment along with guilt or shame that came along with the diagnosis. Although a diagnosis can start to answer a lot of questions, it can lead to a plethora of questions that may or may not be able to be answered. And the longer you deal with it, the better you become at coping with the initial diagnosis, although it can be very shocking in the beginning. So, her emotional roller coaster might sound familiar to a growing number of people who first learned that they had a lifelong mental health or neurodevelopmental condition such as autism, ADHD, or bipolar disorder. As an adult, while diagnosis often feels like a reckoning questions, why did I not know sooner? Could my life have been different? And it can all feel all consuming. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. And it can feel like, is this the story of my life at this point? Like, is this it? This is all I have to look forward to in life, is just going through trials and tribulations of my mental illness. But that said, no, that's not all there is to life. Um, Life is a very beautiful thing, whether you have a diagnosis or you don't, whether you got something going on or you don't, and most of us got something going on. Um, you have to, you got to roll with the punches, and you got to find a way to cope with the diagnosis and do whatever treatment plan works best for you. But always find the good in life outside of the diagnosis. I had to learn to not, my bipolar is not who I am. It's a it's an extension of me. It's not I'm me and it is it, but it does not own me. I own it. I decide how it's going to rule my life. Integrating a diagnosis into one's identity can be a long, sometimes painful journey, but the other side often it lies in self-acceptance that many late diagnosed adults have long struggled to achieve. That acceptance piece is very hard to get to. I'll be honest, whether you're a kid or you're an adult, accepting like I got something like serious going on with me up here, it's very hard. Like, it's times where I'd be like, man, I'm really like, sometimes I would just be a little messed up in there. My brain be a little not where I want it to be. But that's okay. Because I work through it and I find ways to fight it. Self-awareness is a huge tool if you have anything going on. It's very important. So why now? Why would you just now find out as an adult that you have a diagnosis? Why not as a kid? So some evidence suggests that the pandemic drove many people to initially seek a diagnosis. For one, prescriptions for ADHD medication surged from 2018 to 2022, especially among women and adults ages 20 to 39. Yeah, that does not surprise me for a few reasons. ADHD medicines, some people might use them for things that they shouldn't, but you would be surprised how many people have ADHD. Like, I be talking to people a lot of the time, and I just be like, bruh, the ADHD or the OCD is strong with this one because dang. But it's like, I have my own issues keeping my focus and not getting distracted as well. So, I can't be mad at it. You know what I mean? While some long-term conditions like bipolar disorder may in fact not manifest until adulthood, symptoms of neurodevelopmental conditions including autism and ADHD typically do first appear in childhood. Indeed, per the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, a diagnosis should be granted only if symptoms were present in the first decade or so of life. Yet for many adults, even those whose childhood symptoms seem crystal clear in hindsight, the possibility that they might have autism or ADHD was not raised until well past their teen years. Why were their early symptoms ignored, minimized, or overlooked? It's a lot of reasons. So for many, the transition to adulthood was itself the catalyst that turned symptoms from inconvenient to truly unmanageable, says Scott Shapiro, an NYC-based psychiatrist who specializes in adult ADHD, CBT, and productivity coaching. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, if you did not know. The structure and support provided by parents and teachers can serve to lessen or even altogether hide a child's academic or social challenges, often all the way through high school. Whew. Goodness gracious. So this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Your support system that you have during childhood is so much broader and filled so much with so many more people during childhood than adulthood. These supporters may downplay your symptoms as just hormones or a part of growing up. So during adulthood, however, we start to say things like, at this age you should know better. So it shows just how behind mentally a person might be due to their mental health affliction. You don't get that so much during your childhood. Like, yeah, you might get that. You're older than that, but like when you're a kid, people develop at such different rates. It's like, come on. There are certain things that like are obviously just absurd. No 16-year-old should be having a full out temper tantrum, but I digress. So yeah, as they go off to college and then they go into the workforce, a lot of scaffolding they had is removed. At the same time, responsibilities and demands increase, expected to hold a job, maintain a social life, and perhaps care for children or aging parents. Adults with neurodevelopmental disorders can find themselves adrift and overwhelmed. At that point, the challenges that were perhaps masked at an earlier age may start to cause problems, says Shapiro. So yeah, things go from, this is a little inconvenient, this ain't great, to, bro, I can't live like this. Like, I need something to like I need to figure this out. Because again, you got all these people that can like pick up your slack for you when you're a kid. When you're an adult, you live by yourself, all that. Who about to pick up the slack? If you don't live with nobody, you don't got nobody to help you, who's going to pick up the slack? And if your mental health is so bad that you can't barely function, then you're probably not able to maintain a relationship well enough to have somebody to help you at the house. Unless it's your parents. So it's like, and nobody wants to live with their parents for the rest of their life. And your parents can only step in and help out so much the older you get. So symptoms may not only become more visible with time, but they may in fact also worsen. So early episodes of bipolar disorder, for example, they tend to be milder and more responsive to treatment than subsequent episodes. If teen or young adult mania goes untreated, it's likely that later episodes will be harder to manage. Increasingly destructive bipolar symptoms can thus be a double-edged sword. They can wreak havoc on an individual's life, yet their escalating nature may be what finally secures a life-changing diagnosis. So I'm going to link the video where I talked about bipolar disorder in the description so you all get an idea of what those symptoms are. But like self-destructive symptoms would be like spending too much money, having a grandiose sense of self, indulging in sexual pleasures, just all around your inhibitions are basically lowered. It's almost like you're drunk all the time. Like you will just do anything. Like whatever you want to do, you're just going to do it. And whatever delusion you have in your head, you're just going to go along with it. Like it's crazy. And it's almost like you get to a kid-like state of mind and you need to have the support that a kid would need, but you're an adult and people aren't going to treat you like a kid when you're an adult. Just being honest, most people are not going to, they're not going to give you that. So like your manic episodes continuing to worsen, that's a huge indicator to a doctor you have bipolar. I think that was kind of what like sealed the deal for me. Because I had a few minor situations where I had psychosis or like just something that would last like a day or two. And then I'd like snap out of it and like go back to normal. with the help of some medication. Um, but yeah, after like the first one, the first one that I had at 16, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm noticing a pattern. Like she keeps kind of losing it and then coming back and then losing it again. So like it seems like it might be, you know, this might be that. It makes sense when we go back to the story I told y'all about my running with my mental illness at 18. My earlier episodes didn't point as clear of a picture of the bipolar as the one that I had during my adulthood, nor were they as severe. And that's true. The one I had at 16, that one was like a wake up call. Obviously, something was going on. The one that I had at 18, we already knew what it was. You know what I mean? We already know what this is. We just got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. So, a study in the Journal of Autism found that individuals who received a diagnosis in childhood felt better about themselves than those who did as adults. Felt better about themselves than the ones that did as adults. So, I guess that kind of answers the question. Yeah. But, I mean, I'm going to be honest, it's just because of how long you have to, like, start to cope with it. Like, by now, I've been dealing with this shit for almost 10 years. In a couple years, it'll be 10 years. So, ew. That said, so I'm gonna be able to figure it out and start to navigate it a little bit better than someone that just found out today at 23 that they have the diagnosis. So they're 7 years behind on figuring it out. So that's 7 years of healing, 7 years of self-awareness gaining, 7 years of falling on my face and getting back up and falling on my face and getting back up. Like, so a study in the autism, wait. Sharp fluctuations in self-esteem are common in untreated bipolar disorder, with self-worth usually at its lowest during depressive episodes. Very true. Um, you could go from grandiose to I hate myself to grandiose to I hate myself. Like when Kanye says things like I'm Jesus, grandiose to humble enough to follow Jesus, humble enough to humanize himself, humble enough to, you know what I mean, show his, to I'm Jesus. Like you going from two totally different extremes. That's why bipolar disorder is so scary to the people that are not living in it, because it's like, bro, you was just here like happy as fuck. Now you're over here with it and I'm just confused. Like, what's going on? And can't even tell you, bro. It's a lot. That cycling, just as confusing and scary as it is to other people, how do you think it is to deal with it? You know what I mean? Like, it ain't. I mean, now it is, but it hasn't been like that up until now. Okay, so anyway, the longer you have to process something, the better you feel about it. The older you get, the more you get set in your ways. So it's easier to learn and unlearn habits and maintain your mental health during adolescence, since you're still developing and you're adaptive to change, rather than as an adult. It can make the process just that much more difficult. The older I get, bruh, you ain't gonna make me move on shit, like certain things. When I was a kid or younger, like, yeah, okay. You're, what's the word? Not receptive. Impressionable. That's it. You're impressionable at a young age. So, you're not, the older you get, the less impressionable you become. Meaning, the harder you are to move. You become less malleable as the older you get. That's why I ain't about to get into that, but yeah. Without conclusive explanation for why someone feels Without a conclusive explanation for why so much feels so hard, some adults with undiagnosed ADHD, autism, or bipolar disorder retreat into self criticism and shame. Somebody says, I felt that if I just beat myself up more and more, I wouldn't lose valuable things or be late or screw something up. Jane says, a journalist, she often passed on jobs she wanted, convinced she could never work fast enough to succeed. So if you're undiagnosed and you're dealing with like work challenges or just things where like you're missing the mark and everybody else seems to be able to do something very simply, it's frustrating and you count yourself out before you even get the opportunity to do better. And that's one thing that breaks my heart about having a mental health affliction that you just haven't been able to like pinpoint it yet. So, relief, recognition, and regret. That's the next section of the article. And it's basically saying when a clinician finally hits the explanation that makes sense, the late the relief for late diagnosed adults can be overwhelming. If they're lucky, their sense of self shifts rapidly and decisively for the better. So hopefully your diagnosis makes you feel good and not bad. Hopefully you start to feel empowered and understanding like, okay, I know what this is, because once you realize what your problem is, you can start to fix it. I know what this is. Now I know what medicine I need to take. I need to know what treatment plan I need to go on. Now I can remedy this. Now I can be normal enough to live life better than I am now. So the diagnosis is what finally made me stop beating myself up, James recalls. It triggered the realization that what she lacked was not willpower, but tools to manage her challenges. She shared her newfound ADHD status freely, thrilled to have an explanation for why she was the way that she was. She says she's more ready to reach out for help when she's stuck instead of just letting it loop in her head forever. Her anxiety, though not fully eradicated, doesn't have the same grip. I love that. All right, so I want to say that I ask all of you that are struggling with your mental health to understand that you do not need a diagnosis to explain why you are the way you are. It is likely that what you are experiencing is, in fact, you not having the tools to manage your challenges rather than an issue of willpower. This is not to say not to seek diagnosis, but rather to convey that your struggles and challenges are valid regardless of a diagnosis. Do not beat yourself up, but rather give yourself grace. Understand that embarking on a diagnosis, if you haven't yet received one, is not a weak decision, but it is the opposite. It's a mark of a truly strong person to understand why you are not a perfect person and work to become the best person that you can be. You got this. You're not alone. A diagnosis can bring you clarity. So listen to your body, listen to your heart, your mind, your soul, everything, and put yourself in the best mental position that you possibly can. All right. Gave y'all my little speech. Now let's get back into it. So research indicates that the majority of newly diagnosed adults share this sense of recognition, gratitude, relief at least to some degree. Yet feelings of frustration, disappointment, anger, or sadness may not be behind across several studies exploring late diagnosis of autism and ADHD specifically. Between 30 and 50% of participants reported negative emotional responses, including regret for lost time that often occurred concurrently with more positive reactions. So, I mean, yeah, I would expect that, frankly, you're going to feel a range of emotions when you get diagnosed. It's both. You're going to feel good. You're going to feel bad. You're going to have days where you feel great. You're going to have days where you feel like crap. It's just part of life. I'm going to just keep it a being with you. It's just part of life. But we can all get through it together and foster an environment where people feel safe to figure out what they've got going on. So when you receive a diagnosis, you almost have to grieve the version of yourself living without the disorder you had in your head. Process this. Take the time to understand that these feelings and also along with the things that you cannot do are many things that there are many things you can do that other people cannot do. I say that bipolar is my superpower because when I feel down about my symptoms, I know that it is my superpower. I know that it is something that allows me to connect with the world in a way that other people cannot. Connect with other people in a way that people cannot. Understand people in a way that people cannot. It's just, I'm blessed to have anything that God gave me that allows me to continue to live life the way that I do it. And I'm going to continue to do it. But I'm going to be honest, it took me years to get to a point where I love what I got going on. I don't expect somebody to day one be like, yay, I have depression. Yay. This is a great day. I'm so glad I found this out. I don't expect that, but I do hope that you, while you take the bad, take the good and understand, okay, I know what I got going on now and I'm going to fix it. Grieving what could have been, while normal and relatively common, can in some cases start to feel all-consuming for many late diagnosed individuals. Notes Vanessa Bow, an associate professor at and director of Lifespan ASD Lab at Rutgers University. Bow encourages patients to focus less on what could have been and more on how they want this diagnosis and the knowledge of themselves to affect their future. I love that. When that feels easier said than done, it may be useful to channel those negative emotions into compassion, both toward oneself and towards those who miss the signs, and perhaps even look for a bright side of a late diagnosis. Like I said, always look for the bright side. There is a bright side. There's always a silver lining. I don't know if y'all have ever seen the movie Silver Linings Playbook. Watch that movie. If y'all ain't listen to me about nothing else, watch Silver Linings Playbook. It'll tell you all about being bipolar, all about dealing with mental illness, all about finding the silver lining. I'm telling you. Ludmila Proslova, a professor at Vanguard University in Costa Mesa, California, says it's possible to mourn missed opportunities without looking back in anger, she's found. I like that. I like that a lot. There's a flip side to being diagnosed as an adult that I hadn't considered either. I don't think I would have taken the risks I did in my education and in my career if I had been diagnosed as a child. I like that perspective. I think that, like I said, you got the good, you got the bad. One of the bad things about your diagnosis, the earlier you find out, you avoid certain situations. You don't do certain things. And when you're growing up, when you're a kid, sometimes those things kind of separate you from everybody else. When you know about it, you're going to be cautious of it. When you don't, you're not. So, although it's great to work on it, I'm sure that there is a level of fluidity that comes along with not having that. Oh, I know that I have this. I know I have to take this medicine. I know I got to do this. I know I got to, you know what I mean? I could understand her perspective. Today, Proslova's research and writing focus on how companies can create truly inclusive spaces, not just for neurodivergent people, but for everyone. Everything we've been through makes us who we are. And that's why I love, learning about mental illness so much and all these things, because it's there's this bright side that you can come into the world and you can help people like you. And it's not a selfish thing that you're doing. And I love that. Um, so there's the other benefit of experiencing mental health afflictions is that you have expert experience on a matter that you can help people with. Um, I told y'all that already. Um, let's see. You also have JC Criswell is quoted as saying that an ADHD diagnosis in her sophomore year changed her perspective. It wasn't that she wasn't smart enough or tried so hard for nothing. With the treatment, traits that once felt like obstacles started to feel like superpowers. I love that. That's why I be telling y'all bipolar is my superpower. Um, and it is real nice when you figure out like, oh, I wasn't tripping. It was it was this. You know what I mean? I'm not dumb. I'm not I'm not slow. People don't need to make me feel bad for forgetting things. I got something going on with my brain. Give me a break. So, moving forward, fortunately, research suggests that even the most labyrinth, labyrinthine post diagnosis paths end happily, more often than not. So, figure out what you got going on. It's worth doing, regardless of anything. It's worth it. In literature reviews looking at either autism or ADHD self acceptance and an increase in self esteem following adulthood diagnosis are consistent themes. Diagnoses, on the whole, tend to reduce self blame and increase feelings of control. When you know what the problem is, you can fix it. When you don't, you're kind of just sitting there clueless, not even making any type of progress. Here might be some back and forth. There might be some back and forth, but at least in the data we have, it seems that almost everybody gets there. And like I said, your healing journey with anything, whether it be your mental health, your breakup, your family trauma, whatever, you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, and that's just life. You figure out how to get through the bad days, you cherish the good days, and you keep it pushing. Individuals with bipolar disorder often report feeling shame for hurting loved ones while in the throes of mania. Yeah, I have a lot of regret for the way that I acted towards certain people when I was manic, and I can't go back in time. I can't. Dang, I didn't like that. I can't go back in time. I can't fix it. I can't reverse what I did or what I said. I don't think that those people were, some of those people were not meant to be in my life regardless. And I was going to find that out anyway. But that said, I still wish I wouldn't have did what I did. So, can't go back in time, can't do anything to fix that now, but what I can do, and I made my apologies, but what I can do is moving forward, not allow my mental health to get me to a point where I ever repeat those same mistakes with anybody else. From experience, oh, okay. Boom, we went there. Shame whether its source can be sticky and it's unlikely to disappear the moment a diagnosis is granted. But taking steps towards letting go with the help of a therapist, if needed, is essential to the healing process, says Shapiro. I really believe that if you don't address shame, it can help or it can keep the person from reaching their full potential. You gotta feel your emotions. You gotta feel shame. If you feel shame towards something you did towards somebody because of something that happened during a mental health an episode, feel it, Understand where it's coming from. If you need to make apologies, but move past it and remember that you didn't do it because you wanted to. You didn't do it because you're a bad person or for any reason other than you were going through it. And move forward and understand that you're going to do whatever you got to do to not go through that again. And that's all you can do. And keep getting better. But that shame will hold you back. I'm telling you, I was depressed for a long time after I got out of my episode. And it held me back from getting back on the horse and living life again. I would wallow in my shame and not grow or move forward. And it stunted my growth at that time. So don't let yourself get to that point. When I got better, I made a point to personally apologize to everyone I hurt during my episode. Not everyone understands mental illness, and even if they do, they may not grant you forgiveness for your actions. That's okay because it has to be accepted. Understand your decisions you make when you're manic are not you, and as much as taking responsibility is important, so is giving yourself grace and not understanding that you cannot control what you cannot control. Simply learning as much as possible about the condition one has been diagnosed with and the various ways it can manifest can have surprisingly positive effects on one's self-esteem. So, it's worth it. Become a resident expert. Educate people about the disorder so they can spread awareness and deal with you and others better. Some late diagnosed individuals have found that finding a therapist who shares their diagnosis, an increasingly common thing for therapists to disclose, is particularly valuable. I've never knowingly had a therapist that has bipolar. As long as they're not in the throes of an episode, we would be able to definitely get along. We would definitely be able to relate. And they could probably give me perspective that they've been through things I had never been through. I've been through things they might have never been through. So that would be interesting. And you know what? If y'all do experience that in your life, please tell me about it. Not in the comments. That ain't nobody's business. But I want to know. It ain't my business. But if you feel like, enlightening me on an experience like that, I would love to know about that. Because that sounds very interesting to me. I can't wait to help people with bipolar disorder from my personal experience. That's literally all I want to do. Like, coming soon. But anyway, the article, this one was one of my favorites because I was able to relate on some real personal. I was able to get other people's perspective from something that I've never taught. Okay, I've talked to some adults that were diagnosed as adults, but I've never sat down and been like, how do you feel about you being diagnosed right now versus you being a kid? Like, would it have been better? I never thought about it. I never, ever thought about it. So, that said, if anybody, has some experiences they want to share and, we could go back and forth and chit chat, let me know. If you made it this far, leave a comment, subscribe, tell your friends about it. And thank y'all for listening to me ramble on. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. And I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.